Good afternoon. This is February 18th, 2020. This is your intro to trigonometry lesson, and I'm going to do it from home. So I'm going to try to keep this as short and simple as I can. This is not meant to scare you, the word trigonometry, but it is taking you a little bit deeper into a realm of geometry that you have not yet seen. So if you notice the name of the lesson, I'll start there. The name was SOH CAH TOA. And what SOH CAH TOA stands for is actually, I'll read it, but I'm not going to write it. You'll see how I write it here in a second. But it stands for sine opposite hypotenuse, cosine adjacent hypotenuse, tangent opposite adjacent. And what this is called is a mnemonic device, which means a way to remember something. So you could probably think of another mnemonic device that you use from time to time. One we use in algebra all the time is PEMDAS, which stands for parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. The mnemonic PEMDAS is meant to help you remember what order to do what operations throughout the simplification of an expression. That was a lot of words. Okay, let's get back to SOH CAH TOA. So, what are all those weird words that I said? One of them was sine. Okay, now it's actually spelled out sine with the E, but we don't usually put that. Instead, we put the trigonometric equivalent of the variable x. So you know in algebra, everything's in terms of x, like solve for x. In trig, a lot of times you'll use a theta, which kind of should look like that. But by the way, I just thought of this. If you're not on the back of your sheet, go ahead and flip to the back and write some of this down. I'll box in what you for sure should have at the end, but I don't know if I already said that. Anyway, back to this variable theta. Theta always stands for an angle. So let's say I wanted this to extend out, and now I have this angle theta, and then I could be maybe looking for these sides, which could be labeled A, B, or C. Okay, so we could find A, B, and C, and if this is a right triangle, we've already learned 3 ways to do this. So the next additional way that you can find any side or angle of a right triangle would be to use trigonometry. Let's go to the next 2 letters in the SO part of our mnemonic device, the O and the H. So in any triangle that's right, let's say we put theta here, you'll have 3 sides that we won't use A, B, and C for because that's not very specific. It doesn't help me to determine where these sides are in reference to my angle. Like, for instance, is my side touching it? Is it the hypotenuse? Is it this other guy over here? That's going to matter a great deal when trying to figure this out using trig. So we refer to these as the opposite side, which is always completely opposite. You'll notice it's not touching theta. Let me change my color to show you. The 2 sides that are touching theta are right here and right here. And what we do with OPP is it becomes the numerator, so we write equals, of a fraction. Okay, now if any time you get 2 fractions, just remember cross multiply and divide, and this sign thingy, you can always put that over 1. And you might be thinking, how the heck am I going to put sign in my calculator? If you look, or turn your phone sideways if you're using your phone, there is a sign button, and you use it much like you would an exponent. So like if you hit 2 and you want to raise that to some power, you hit the exponent key and it does this. Well, sine is going to do the same thing. It's going to open up a parenthesis, and a lot of times for these first few problems, you'll be given a number to put here, close the parenthesis, and then just continue on either multiplying or dividing that, just like you would a normal number. And that brings us to the last part, which is H, and that stands for what we've always known H to be in a triangle. That's always the hypotenuse that's across from the 90 degree. So you'll notice last week we talked about which is the biggest and the smallest, and now we're using that same method to figure out which one is O, which one is H, and then lastly, let's go on to one of these different ones. Let's go to cosine. So, said cosine. but sometimes when people reference it, they say cos, and that's going to be of theta, and that's going to be equal to, what's this A going to stand for? A is that last side that you haven't seen referenced yet, which is going to be the adjacent side. Adjacent means it's touching our angle, but be careful, sometimes your hypotenuse is touching it also. That's why you got to be very clear on which one the hypotenuse is right from the get-go. And remember, all of these are going to be right triangles, so just go ahead and label that hypotenuse so you don't get confused. So that'll be adjacent ADJ over, and then you have this H again, which is still hypotenuse. Wow, that looks horrible. Try again. So that brings us to our last one, which is called tangent. Tangent, said, spoken like this. That's how it's spelled, and then we abbreviate it as tan theta. And that's going to be O, which we already know as opposite. And this one, tangent, has OA, so it is the only trig function, which trig function means either sine, cosine, or tangent. It is the only trig function that does not utilize the use of the hypotenuse. So that last part is an A, that will be adjacent. Okay, now this is what you need to know for your quiz on Friday. Or actually, I think your class is on Thursday. It's different from all the other classes. But definitely make sure you know that associated with this triangle, associated with this saying. And remember, the saying is just a saying to help you remember. Okay, to continue the video, if you haven't already gotten a set of notes, go ahead and pick one up. I believe they're at the front of the class, or maybe the sub has them. And we're going to go ahead and try to work through a couple of these examples.